Hi, I'm Debbie Gibson. I'm a representative of CHIO, and I am here to talk to you about notification in the law. I'm going to start by sharing screens with you, sharing my screen with you, because we have some great information out of the CHIO website, and that's where we are going to go. Rather than look at me, you're going to look at the information that you need to know. So at the CHIO website, which is www.chiohome.org, you'll go across the top of the screen to Homeschool 101 and down to beginning the journey, because everything you need to know is there. Getting started. Here's a little information for you. You can read that at your own pace. We'll start with the regulations. Click on that. And here are the regulations for excuses from compulsory attendance for home education. So the state of Ohio has compulsory attendance law that requires that children between the ages of 6 and 18 be in school. You can get out of that by receiving an excuse from compulsory attendance for home education from your local superintendent. And these are the regulations that determine that. There's some definitions here. The most important one for us to go over right now is simply home education, which means education primarily directed and provided by the parent or guardian. So that means if you are doing online schooling with the public school, that is not going to fall under these regulations. So that would be a whole different thing. This is specifically for those who are home educating according to the law. So we'll move right on down a little bit here to where it says notification, because that's what we want to talk about mostly. I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. Consistent application of procedures and practices throughout the state by superintendents and parents is essential for children receiving home education and helps to safeguard the primary right of parents to determine the appropriate education for their child or children. So the purpose of that being in there is so that everybody understands that the regulations are the same throughout the state. Every once in a while we see things like, well, I'm homeschooling in such and such a county. What's it like there? Well, the regulations are the same in every single county, school district, all throughout the state. So that's what we want to talk about, is what the regulations are for the entire state. A parent who elects to provide home education shall supply the following information to the superintendent no later than the first week of the start of the public school building the child would attend in the district of residence, or within 1 week of the date on which the child begins to reside in the district. So that's if you're moving into the district during the school year, or within 1 week from the child's withdrawal from school. And that's if you're pulling your child out of school during the school year. So I'm going to go out of this screen now, because the rest of what we're going to discuss is the regulations, which have been copied and pasted onto the notification form. The notification form is basically a copy and paste of those regulations with lines put in here for you to complete the information that's required. You don't have to complete a notification form. Some people do it in a letter form. If you do a letter, please make sure that you include all the information that is required by the regulations. If you just fill out the form, it makes it really easy for you. So as we already read this part. So moving on down, the school year for which notification is made for this coming school year would be 2020-2021. The name of parent, it can be one parent or both parents. I recommend, this is not legal advice, but I recommend if the child only lives with one parent, then you would only list the parent that the child is living with according to custody papers. Just makes life easier. It's not a law, and I did not give you legal advice just now. That was my own personal recommendation, just to make things simpler. Address, and that's the address the child lives at. And then the next line is telephone number optional, email optional. Both of those, we suggest that you leave blank or write in /A for not applicable. The reason for that is because you want all of your communication with the superintendent to be in writing. You might say, well, email is in writing, and that is true. However, if you send an email, you have no way of knowing when it was opened, by whom it was opened, if it was opened. It could have been dumped in a junk folder somewhere and deleted. You'll never know unless somebody emails you back. If they don't ever email you back, you don't know if they got it. We'll talk a little bit later when we're all through the form. We'll talk about how we actually mail it to make sure that you know it's received. Number 3 is usually left blank or N/A for not applicable. This is the name, address, and telephone number of the person or persons who will be teaching the child the subject set forth in paragraph A5, which is this down here, of this rule if other than the parent. Most people, this is not applicable. This is for if, for instance, you are sending your children to your neighbor or your friend or your sister or whomever for them to actually do the home education, then their name and address would go in here. And again, we would leave a telephone number off because we would still want communication to be in writing. This is not for the local sports team coach or the child's violin instructor or any of those kinds of things. This is specifically if somebody else is doing the home education. Number 4 is the full name and birth date of the child or children to be educated at home. If you need more lines than that, then you just add another piece of paper. Notice that there's a line for a name, a line for a birth date. There is no line for a social security number. That is not required by law. Some superintendents ask for that. Please don't give it. That is definitely not needed information. There's no space there for a grade level. We don't use grade levels in school, in homeschooling, and I'm sure that you'll hear more about that in other sessions, so I won't talk a lot about that, but please do not include a grade level ever when you are sending in your notification. Number 5, notice there's a little tiny space here for you to just put a little check mark. You're giving an assurance that home education will include the following, except that the home education shall not be required to include any concept, topic, or practice that is in conflict with the sincerely held religious beliefs of the parent. These are the required subjects. You are giving assurance that you're going to teach every one of those subjects. I get questions a lot of times about, well, how in the world would I teach first aid every single year? Well, it doesn't say anything about how long you have to teach them each year. So you're not going to teach an entire course on first aid every single year for 13 years. That really doesn't make any sense at all. However, you have children, obviously, that's why you're here. They're going to fall down. They're going to get scrapes and scratches and bruises and all kinds of things that we don't even want to think about, but it's going to happen. When you administer first aid to your children, talk to them about what you're doing and why you're doing it. You're teaching them first aid, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, every year, every summer especially. Number 6, you're going to put a check mark here, but there's a lot more to it than just a check mark on this one. See the word attached. You're going to attach to this form a brief outline of the intended curriculum for the current year. A couple really important words in that phrase there. The first word is brief, which of course means short. Outline. Well, that's kind of a funny one. Since I've been doing these getting started workshops around the state for the last few years, I've discovered that there are about 4 people in the state who actually do this in an outline form. You can do it in a paragraph. You can do it in a list. Nobody seems to really care. I've always done mine in an outline form just because I saw that word outline and I thought I had to, but probably most people don't use an outline form, and that's fine. The next important word here is intended curriculum. Now, the reason that that word is so important is because you are going to give the superintendent a brief outline of your plan for the school year. You're allowed to change that plan anytime during the school year. You don't have to get permission from anybody. You don't have to notify anybody that you changed things. You can change things because the child's interest level changed, your interest level changed, life happened, all kinds of reasons you might change your original intended plan, and that's fine. Sometimes you'll just find out that you had this beautiful plan laid out and you got into studying, oh, I don't know, birds, for instance. Found out that your child just has a love for birds, wanted to study them way more deeply than you had planned, and you spend more time on that subject, and it's okay. And then you're going to probably end up skipping some of the other things you had planned for that year. It's okay. It's fine. Such outline is for informational purposes only. The important part about that is that that lets you know that regardless of what you turn in the way of your intended curriculum, the superintendent cannot say that's not a good plan. That's absolutely not acceptable. The only reason they can reject your plan, your intended curriculum, is if you've left out any of these subjects. Your intended curriculum must include all of the required subjects. If it does, they're not going to reject your outline of intended curriculum. For instance, if you want to say you're just talking about science, when you do your intended curriculum outline, instead of saying science, you're going to say maybe botany, ornithology, whatever kinds of things you're going to be studying in science that year, chemistry, astronomy, you name it. There's a lot of choices there. Um, Name a few specific things you're going to study in these classes that year or that you're planning to study. When you get down to number 7, it says a list of textbooks, etc. Any teaching materials that you're going to use for your teaching for the current year would go on in a list here. Now, a couple important things here are, first, there's no way you're going to list every resource that you intend to use this year, because if the libraries ever open up again, you're going to park yourself at the library as a homeschooler and you're going to take out books all the time. They've got so many resources there for homeschoolers these days, not just books. Librarians are fantastic for helping home educators find what they're looking for, dig in deeper to certain areas and things like that. So you're going to find sources as you go along through your school year. So there's no way you're going to list them all. The important thing here is that you list something for each subject listed in number 5. If you list something for each of those subjects, your list of intended resources is not going to be rejected. Again, they can't look at your list of resources and say, that's not a good resource for that subject, or that's not a good resource for that grade level. That's not their choice. That's not their option to do that. Such list is for informational purposes only. It's only to let them know that not only are you covering all the subjects that are required by law, but you also have access to the resources to teach those subjects. So again, just a real quick review there. You're going to assure them that you are going to teach all of these subjects, even if it is only a few minutes here and a few minutes there of each of these things. On to the history of the United States and Ohio, history of the United States and Ohio, as well as national, state, and local government. These things happen in conversation, little snippets here and there as you visit parks and monuments and museums and things. You're going to get little bits of those here and there. So don't worry about that. Give them the assurance that you're teaching all these things. Give them an outline that includes all of these subjects in just a teeny bit more detail. And then a list of resources that you intend to use to cover each of those required subjects. It's important to note that not all those resources need to be books. They certainly don't all need to be textbooks. Some people don't use any textbooks. You can list textbooks, you can list any other kind of books you want, but also important resources would be the local museums, parks, perhaps your YMCA, local sports teams. All of those things are good resources that you can list. Number 8, you're going to put another little check mark here, an assurance that the child will be provided a minimum of 900 hours of home education each school year. Notice that, again, just a little check mark. You are not attaching any log of your 900 hours. You do not need to keep a log. There is nothing here that says that you are required to keep a log, only that you're giving them an assurance that you're going to provide a minimum of 900 hours of home education. Home education is educating at home. So you'll be doing that pretty much every moment your child is awake. If you are in the kitchen cooking dinner and your child is in the next room building with Legos or whatever kinds of blocks they like to build or playing some kind of game, they're learning something. If you are making dinner and they're watching you make dinner and you're interacting with them, they're learning something. So they're learning all the time, honestly. You sit down and read with them, you play a game with them, you go for a walk and talk about what you're seeing. All of those things are educational. So if you were to keep a log of those 900 hours, you'd get there right around about Thanksgiving time. So there's no need to worry about those 900 hours. You will hit that well before our school year is up. Number 9, another little check mark, assurance that the home teacher has one of the following qualifications. You do not you do not need to, nor do we want you to, circle which of these qualifications you have. You're going to assure them that you have one. That's it. If you are asked to provide a copy of your high school diploma, they have gone beyond um, their realm of questions they're allowed to ask you or things they're allowed to ask you for. They're not allowed to ask you for your high school diploma or any of these other things. You don't have to prove any of these things. You're given assurance that you have one. That's it. Now, if you are lacking any of these things and you're down to letter E here, lacking the above, any of these other things, the home teacher must work under the direction of holding a baccalaureate degree from a recognized college until the child's or children's test results demonstrate reasonable proficiency or until the home teacher obtains a high school diploma or the certificate of high school equivalence, GED. So basically anybody, any parent in Ohio can home educate their children. You just have to figure out which one of these you fit under. And if you need to work under letter E and you need help finding somebody with a baccalaureate degree who is willing to do this for you, get a hold of the CHIO office. We'll be happy to try to help you hook up with somebody. Just call the CHIO office. The phone number is on the first page of our website. Number 10, simply put, sign and date before you mail it. The parent shall affirm the information supplied with his or her signature prior to providing it to the superintendent. So sign it, date it before you mail it. This part down here, we won't talk about right now. I believe somebody else is talking about assessments. For your first time that you notify, you don't need an assessment anyway, so that doesn't make any difference. If Regardless if it's your first time or not, you do not need an academic assessment this year only. Because of the COVID situation, that was, we actually had legislation passed that waived that for this year. So you've got your whole form filled out. You've included your brief outline of intended curriculum for the current year, as well as your list of resources. And you have made a copy of each of those to keep for yourself for your own records at home. You're going to keep a copy, mail a copy to your local superintendent. Name and address should be found on your local school district's website. Once you have put that all in the envelope with addressed to the superintendent, you take it to the post office, mail it certified. In the past, we have always said mail it certified with signature receipt required. So there was a little green card that you attached, cost a little more money. And nowadays, when you mail certified, you get a receipt, which tells when you mailed it. That receipt also has a tracking number on it. So you can now track online when that piece of mail is delivered to the superintendent's office and who signs for it, when it was signed for, and then you screenshot that and you hang on to that screenshot because that's your proof that not only did you mail it, your receipt proves you mailed it. That screenshot of the signature proves that it's been received and who received it. Once they've received it, they have 2 weeks during which they can look over your work, the things that you've sent in, and determine that it's in compliance with the regulations that we have gone over. If it is not in compliance, if something is missing, they have 2 weeks from the time they received it to get back with you in writing and ask you for further information. If it is in compliance, then they should be sending you a letter of excuse from compulsory attendance. It'll just be a letter from the superintendent, usually just a couple of sentences long, telling you that your child has been excused for the purpose of home education for the current school year, and it should list the school year as well. The letter of excuse from compulsory attendance for your child's final year of home education, generally considered their senior year, 12th grade, the year just when you're about to graduate them. You want to hang on to that pretty much forever, because that is sort of a proof that your child has been educated in accordance with the law here in Ohio, so that you keep that with their diploma for eternity as proof to a future employer or higher learning facility that your child has been home educated in accordance with the law. They didn't drop out of high school and print their own diploma. You have the proof from the superintendent that you were doing things in accordance with the law. And that's about it. If you have any trouble with any of those things, you can feel free to contact the TO office. You can contact us via Facebook. We have a Facebook group, and I'm always on Facebook as well. My name is Debbie Gibson, and I'm pretty easy to find in the TO group. So I admin that group, so I'm happy to help you in any way you can. I can. If there's anything else I can do for you in regards to this, if you have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me. And I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you.